Thank you, Senator Keneally. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I want to discuss our people's health and safety, the security of our national economy, and thirdly, our national economic recovery in the near future and the long term, because no one is discussing the key issue, and One Nation has solutions. I remind people of government's three primary roles: protect life, protect property and protect freedom. Importantly, in democracies, those governing do so only with the permission of the people governed, and those governing are responsible to the people. I will in this speech discuss a former Prime Minister who I had respected until I did my research. I want to thank everyone who is caring for us and keeping us safe, including healthcare workers, police, defence, emergency workers, and everyone serving others, including helping to supply and feed us, electricity generation, cleaners, garbage collection, water supply and many more. Many of us feel gutted that this year will be the first time Anzac Day public commemorations have been called off. This illustrates the seriousness of the threat we face. Firstly, health and safety. This must be every government's primary focus. Now, there is no manual on dealing with COVID-19. So while I empathise with government's challenge, people want answers. People are feeling confused, afraid, concerned. Some feel lost, grieving for those dying and grief for our country. Some feel angry. Many are still living in disbelief. Why? Because people want to know what has to be done, why it has to be done, and how long before it's over, and what will it cost? Financial, social, personal, mental, emotional. Remember, we have to pay these bills. People have a right to know the fair dinkum facts, and right now many people are, like me, in the dark or plagued with uncertainty. 2.5 weeks ago, in this place, I praised the success of East Asian nations in combating COVID-19, particularly Taiwan and South Korea. Their focus is on people's health and safety. Both are democracies, and government provides strong, clear leadership. The people trust those governments because they used facts, instituted rigorous widespread testing of body temperature and virus infection, relied on sharing data, and had solid processes and systems with medical supplies and facilities. Both those nations quickly arrested the virus, and instead of isolating everyone, they quickly and rigorously isolated the infected and the vulnerable, allowing the majority of healthy people to continue working. This is their lesson to us, acting decisively to make health their first priority, minimise disturbance to their economies. Western nations, though, have tried to balance health and the economy, and as a result, both have been compromised. Australians are asking serious questions. Why did it take so long for the government to publicly discuss modelling, as it pretended to do so yesterday, yet not release the modelling? Why did the modellers release the draft version separately, yet not release the model? Why did the government not discuss the underlying assumptions, including infection, transmission and mortality rates? Why did the government not discuss the variables modelled? Without that, we can make no conclusions. Why did the government not disclose the modeller's result? Did the government gather data and facts from successful nations like Taiwan and South Korea? And if so, what did it learn? Now, modelling is often flawed, yet in this case, isn't failing to get the data or failing to model acceptance of needless deaths? When did state and federal health ministers last get together to scenario plan the effects and management of a virus pandemic? Have they ever? Have they considered their interaction with border security and who to allow into our country from planes and ships? Did they involve the hospitals and medical colleges? Data suggests Australia's testing for the virus is narrow and well below the world's best per capita. Why is the government's data on number of cases continually revised with dramatic changes to its graph? Are casualties and deaths from flu and pneumonia here and overseas being reported as from COVID-19? How many people will die with the virus compared with how many people die from the virus? In some nations, are deaths inflated? What is the government's plan for treatment using hydroxychloroquine, showing amazing results in New York and elsewhere, and ivermectin being 100% effective in Monash University's in vitro tests? What is the plan for mental health issues? Everyday Australians want to know, how long will I be working from home? When can we get back to work and school? When will we be safe from this virus? I now turn to the Chinese Communist government that harmed the Chinese people and people worldwide. It hid the outbreak, suppressed the views of the virus, and punished the doctors who wanted to inform and prepare the world. That meant the virus spread rapidly around the world. What will it do now to people in poorer countries, Africa, India? Instead of protecting its people, the Chinese Communist government neglected, controlled and punished them. Worse, in January, the United Nations World Health Organization spread the Communist government's lies that there is no human-to-human transmission of the virus. Then in March, the UN's World Health Organization said the time to act was 2 months earlier, in January. The World Health Organization, gutless, bumbling, incompetent, hopeless, dishonest, inherently corrupt, just like the whole UN. This virus needs to be renamed the Chinese Communist Party UN virus. The Chinese Communist Party and UN need to be held accountable. Compare the Chinese Communist government with that of Taiwan's democratic government. Taiwan's 24 million people responded freely and, as of today, had just 5 deaths. Freedom works. Freedom works, providing the government serves the people. With freedom comes responsibility and self-control, always far superior to imposed control. The communists gave us the virus. Democratic Taiwan gave us medical equipment. Now let's turn to our fragile economy. People expect governments to lead and expect leaders to have a plan based on solid data and facts. Economies are living organisms comprised of families. Economies depend on human interaction. Isolate people and economies wither. So what is the plan for bringing back our economy? What are the government's trigger points for changing strategy from isolating everyone to wider testing and then isolating only the sick and vulnerable, so the healthy majority can return to interacting, producing, exchanging, getting back to work, like Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore? The government shutdown is a ticking time bomb. It is necessary, but it is a ticking time bomb. Humanity needs security, connection, family, friends. The worst thing we can do to a person, after all, is take their job off them. I note now, that this bill needs to be structured as an open cheque to the government to ensure the flexibility to support people. Thirdly, this crisis has highlighted a huge gap in our country's security, shortages of critical equipment like basic medical supplies. Worse, an inability to manufacture medical equipment, cars, many goods that we once made ourselves are now imported. Why? Because the Whitlam Labor government signed the UN's Lima Declaration in 1975 and the Fraser Liberal Nationals government ratified it the very next year to transform manufacturing to third world countries. Worse still, an inability in Australia to grow our own food. We were exporters of basic food commodities like rice and wheat. Now we cannot get enough rice, and due to the virus, Vietnam has blocked exports for us to ensure supplies for its own people. Durum wheat for pasta is in shortage. Why? Because the Howard government, under the guidance of Liberal Senator Robert Hill, Nationals Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson and Liberal Prime Minister John Howard, in 1996 stole farmers' inalienable rights to use the land they bought, and, to avoid paying compensation, colluded with Queensland Nationals Premier Rob Borbidge and later Labor's Premier Peter Beattie, and with New South Wales Labor's State Minister Bob Carr. Why? For the Howard government to comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol. The UN, let's get out. And who buys our farms? The Chinese Communist government, despite banning Australians from buying Chinese properties. Water, what about water? Farmers lost their water as a result of the Turnbull-Howard Water Act of 2007, that, according to world-renowned John Briscoe, took the world's best national water policy under the Murray-Darling Basin Commission and made it the worst under the Turnbull-Howard Murray-Darling Basin Authority. How? Infecting it with politics, UN rules and regulations. The UN exit. This week, yet another farmer, Tanya Gins in New South Wales, asked, "Please help us. Help her against the government, the global corporates, the UN." Our own farmers asking for help against the government, so she and her family can produce food for our people. And then energy. Never before have humans materially advanced so quickly as in the last 170 years. And it was due to ever-decreasing real prices of energy, electricity, oil and gas. The miracle that raised living standards gave us independence from weather and eliminated famines. It gave us longer, healthier, safer, easier, more productive, more comfortable and secure lifestyles. We are the world's second largest exporter of coal and largest exporter of liquefied natural gas. Yet we now have high domestic energy costs. In just a few decades, we went from the world's cheapest electricity, thanks to our clean, high-energy coal, to the world's most expensive electricity, thanks to the Howard government policies based on the UN lies and fraud. 8 years after John Howard was booted from office, he admitted in Britain that on climate science he was agnostic. He had no science, yet he destroyed all these industries. We now export our coal to China so it can produce cheap electricity because China sensibly uses hydro, coal and nuclear, being the cheapest forms of electricity generation. The Chinese already produce about 8 times more coal than does Australia entirely, and they're rapidly increasing their production. India is furiously increasing its production. Why? Because they know cheap energy is the key to productivity, and productivity is the key to wealth generation, and wealth generation is the key to raising everyone's living standards. At the same time, China exports wind turbines and solar panels to us that wreck our environment and steal our precious farmland. We subsidise Chinese companies to install these inefficient monstrosities that raise our electricity costs, destroy reliability of supply and drive our manufacturers and jobs overseas. Why? In our renewal plans, this must be reviewed and dumped. Mind you, it provides entertainment, with Barnaby Joyce and Senator Canavan first speaking clearly as climate sceptics, then contorting and converting to speaking for the UN's climate rort, and now backflipping to copy One Nation's stance. Yet although they now speak like us, they still vote like Trent Zimmerman, Zali Steggall and the Greens. Despite the recent droughts...
Senator Roberts, may I remind you to refer to others in the other place by their correct titles.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. Despite the recent drought, farmers with water could not afford to pay for electricity to pump irrigation water to grow fodder in a drought because of our electricity prices. China and the UN doing this. Exit the UN. Seafood. We have the world's largest continental shelf fishing zone, yet import almost 3/4 of the seafood we consume. Why? Because we have 36% of the world's marine parks that previous ministers like Labor's Mr Tony Burke and Liberal Senator Robert Hill handed to the UN as World Heritage Areas all now manage under UN rules. And who is our largest supplier of seafood imported? China, with its tiny coastline and 56 times more mouths to feed compared to ours. China and the UN. Exit the UN. In Queensland, we have 31 major federal and state policies gutting farming. And as Charleville farmer Dan McDonald says, with every farm input now completely under regulatory control, farming is nationalised. We have lost our food security, our manufacturing, our farmers' land use, our water, our energy security. We have lost our productive capacity, our ability to produce. We have lost our economic resilience, our ability to rebound. All to globalism in the name of interdependency. The corporate elites benefiting from our bureaucrats' gift of farming land and water and benefit from owning Chinese manufacturing. Interdependency is a con. It means we are dependent on others. We are dependent. This virus crisis is exposing a huge gap in our security, from face masks to food to loss of our independence. We voters have allowed our government since the formation of the UN, especially since 1996, to sacrifice our country's productive capacity, our economic resilience, our economic independence and security. Did you elect UN bureaucrats to be in charge? I didn't. Our national debt now is around $600 billion. Queensland's around $90 billion. Before this package, members of Parliament and senior federal public servants need to share the burden, stop the perks like flying business class, cut our superannuation rate, reject or defer salary increases. Let's look to the future. What will the world look like after the Prime Minister's quaintly named 6-month hibernation? In just 3 to 4 months, what will people be doing? Will people emerge from hibernation when we look around? Will we, as a nation, feel supported, excited or depleted, hungry and angry? We need 2 plans, one for now and one for bringing back our productive capacity and economic resilience. One Nation will return with our detailed analysis. When this is over, though, everyday Australians of all backgrounds expect to see and deserve to be a healthy, secure people with a proud, independent Australia that reflects our lifestyle, culture, values, freedom, democracy and potential. All people want is a fair go and governance we can trust to work for our country. Thank you, Madam Deputy President.
Thank you, Senator.